Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss three 90s thrillers starring 90s icon Alicia Silverstone: The Crush, The Babysitter, and True Crime. Directed by Shapiro, 1993's The Crush stars Alicia Silverstone as Adrian, a precocious young teen that becomes dangerously obsessed with her parents' new tenant, played by Cary Elwes. Directed by Guy Ferland, 1995's The Babysitter stars Alicia as Jennifer, a girl who features as the center of several dark fantasies over the course of one night. And directed by Pat Verducci, 1996's True Crime follows Alicia Silverstone as Mary Giordano, a Catholic school senior obsessed with becoming a police officer. After investigating the murder of a fellow student, she soon finds herself in the center of the mystery, and she might go from investigator to victim. Alicia Silverstone's breakout role as Cher in 1995's Clueless thrust the actress into the spotlight and into the everyday pop culture vernacular of the 1990s. However, she also starred in these three movies that were very different from the carefree Beverly Hills teen playing matchmaker. These films showcased the actress' versatility as a girl next door, a bookish teen crime investigator, and as a Lolita-esque homicidal maniac. Also joining me tonight is my fabulous co-host, Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you to the real queen of horror, Zena Dixon, who's joining us tonight. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Excited to talk to my fabulous co-host about some 90s thrillers with starring a 90s icon, Alicia Silverstone. You
Yes.
know, in the 90s, when Scream came out and it was the most popular horror movie at the time, even she was referenced in this movie full of horror movies with the whole, like, as if, that's all I'm saying. Okay, Alicia. So she was such a 90s icon. Clueless came out, and obviously that was like her big breakthrough
Yeah.
movie. It thrust her into the spotlight. But interestingly enough, at the time, she did Clueless, and before that, I knew her also, as the MTV generation of music videos where she starred in these Aerosmith videos with Liv Tyler. And so she was like subconsciously in your subconscious from that direction. But then, Clueless was this, pop culture. It entered the vernacular, all these phrases and sayings that a movie like Scream could sort of quote, and people knew
Right.
exactly what you were talking about. But interestingly enough, just before and just after Clueless, she did these sort of thriller movies. And now, we love talking about a good thriller on this show, especially a good 90s thriller. And,
Yes.
for a show like this that is looking for lost or forgotten horror gems, I think the early to mid 90s is a great landscape of forgotten movies because, like I said, most people do think of the Scream generation or post-Scream generation when it comes to the 90s. But there were a lot of great horror movies and thriller movies of the early mid 90s that I do think get overlooked. So I forget exactly how you and I stumbled upon this conversation, but I recently got on Blu-ray The Crush and The Babysitter, and I had just maybe 3 or 4 months ago watched on like IMDb True Crime. Now, I grew up watching The Babysitter and The Crush. I had seen them on like HBO or Cinemax, late night Friday nights, like eating popcorn, just like, oh, what is this? And True Crime is interesting because I didn't see it at the time, but it's fun for me to watch something like that that's nostalgic without it being nostalgic for me,
Right.
because they all sort of have this same theme. Now, they're predictable. I would say each and every one of them is sort of predictable. You kind of know based on the character that she's playing in each one of them, which she is very versatile. She's very, she definitely, each of her characters, which I think would be a fun reason why to do this episode,
Right.
because she does play such different characters, yet the feeling of the movies are the same.
Mhm.
So, we're going to discuss tonight The Babysitter, The Crush, and True Crime. But I will say right off the bat, The Crush and The Babysitter I saw 1,000 times. I'll probably watch them 1,000 more times. But I did get them on Blu-ray. They looked amazing. Now, The Crush, she plays this sort of Lolita-esque homicidal maniac stalker. In The Babysitter, she plays the girl next door, in which all these sort of dark fantasies are being projected upon her. And then in True Crime, she plays this sort of Catholic school girl investigative detective. Like she's obsessed with true crime, and like she becomes involved in a crime that hits a little close to home.
Mhm.
But of the three movies, I think The Babysitter is it's definitely a sleazier movie, I feel like. But watching it as an adult, and I don't want to minimize the sleaze factor of it, because
Right.
I think it definitely was geared towards that sort of like teenage male audience, like straight male watching this movie. But if you kind of, if you want to be academic about it, you watch this movie and she plays Jennifer. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. She plays Jennifer, this young woman who just wants to babysit for the night. But the parents of the kids she's babysitting, as well as her boyfriend and this guy who's sort of obsessed with her that she may or
Yeah.
may not have dated at some point, they're all having different fantasies throughout the night, and most of them star her in one way or the other, and they get progressively darker. But
Mhm.
it's interesting to me that she plays the one character in the film that's not having any fantasies. Even the little boy is sort of having
Yeah.
like fantasies about her. And I think it's an interesting commentary about how she's the only one who's satisfied with who she is. She knows who she is, so she can live in this reality. Whereas all these other characters, with the exception of the young boy, and for him it's more of like a pubescent, innocent fantasy, the rest have these really dark sexual undertones to them, or just outright they're dark and sexual. And I think it's because they're all unhappy with their lives. So it's an interesting, look into the psyche of people at their darker nature, where on the outside they might seem a little bit less, harmful. And then in The Crush, which by the way I love, and we can get into this, but I love that The Crush and The Babysitter both have like reaches to the Nightmare in Elm Street series. You have Jennifer Rubin, who's also in The Crush, who was in Nightmare 3, and then in The Babysitter, Tuesday Night, who took over the role of Kristen, plays this waitress in the bar. So I always just love that, like, the horror iconography is always present. But The Crush, I think, is a better made movie, but in some ways maybe just as exploitative as the Babysitter, but like in a different way. Interestingly enough, she plays Adrian, who originally was named Dorian in the
Mhm.
movie, and they had to change the name because the guy who wrote this based this on a true event that happened to him,
Mhm.
and the girl's real name was Dorian. So I was like, wait a minute, so you're this guy writer who had a girl obsessed with him, and instead of and not you obviously didn't learn your lesson, because you now made a movie that's going to bring her back into your life, which you did
Right.
because she faced a lawsuit. But I was like, what were you thinking naming this character Dorian? Like, anyway, but The Crush, definitely has that sort of, she's sort of, it's the evil girl syndrome of like the late 90s or late 80s, early 90s, the Glenn Close from Basic Instinct, the Jennifer Jason Leigh from Single White Female, the Rebecca De Mornay from The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. So it's sort of that, like, or Jamie Lee Curtis from Mother's Boys, the sort of like nymphette who becomes a fixated and obsessed and wants one thing and only has one thing only. And then in true crime, it's also in its own way exploitative,
Mhm.
maybe not as on the nose as the other two, but it follows her as she's like having her sexual awakening from this like sort of repressed Catholic atmosphere. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if you know this, in the trailer, I just happened to watch the trailer for it, and it looks like there were like all these deleted scenes. Like there's this whole backstory of like the mother and how she was like, your father was not who you think he was, and she's talking to her when she was a little girl, and then you see Alicia Silverstone's character as a little girl, like watching her father's clothes burn in this barrel in the backyard. Like I was like, oh, what's that about? Which I'm curious about because I really didn't like the mother in True Crime. I thought she was kind of a jerk,
Mhm.
but when you watch the trailer, you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe there is a little bit more to why she's so bitter. But anyway, the three movies though I think are fun. I think that they have a lot of like silly little moments. I think they all have nice little like wrap up endings. You get the sort of emotional horror punch of like the
Mhm.
climatic moment that it all comes together. But Zena, tell me what were how did you first come into these movies? What are your impressions of them? What do you love? You know, etc. etc.
Okay, well, first, I guess I'll start with The Babysitter. The Babysitter I've watched like you many times, like as a kid. I really didn't understand it. I had no idea what was going on. I'm also going to be honest, it's not one of my absolute favorites. You know, I have a lot of things that I'm not a huge fan about when it comes to this movie. And you
I
kind
was
of touched on that, like with the fantasizing, like even down to the little boy. And the only person besides from Jennifer, the little girl Bitsy, she didn't have any, everyone else just had like these motives. And it's just kind of like, can't, she just wants to babysit.
right, right,
You
right.
know, and like why her boyfriend, and even with the guy who plays her boyfriend, Jeremy London, he was big in the 90s, early
Yeah,
2000s, so I think that's really cool if they put those two together, because it seemed like, even like looking at the cast, it's a great cast.
yeah.
And so they probably had like really high hopes for the movie. But I do remember as a kid that, like I said, I didn't understand it, at all, but I remember watching it like you, like on HBO, or maybe it was on Showtime, I don't remember. And a lot of things went over my head, but even back then I was thinking she kind of just wants to babysit. So I've touched on her boyfriend, who's played by Jeremy London. His name is Jack. With him as an example, it's like you let some guy get into your head, like, okay. So there was just like a lot of things. So, and then I rewatched it. I rewatched it earlier this week, but before that, last summer, it used to be on Tubi, and so I haven't seen it in years. So I rewatched it, and it just made me feel so dirty. It's one of those
Yeah.
movies, and not saying that they show anything explicit, they don't. It's just more of where, like you even touched on, the dark mindset, and they're just set on this one thing. And then even down to, it's like, okay, with the mother as an example, what was her name? Was it Dolly?
Dolly, yeah.
Okay, with the mother as an example, and it's just kind of like, okay, if you don't feel comfortable with this girl watching your kids, or you don't want her around your husband, and you know that your husband's sleazy, I don't know, maybe you should hire somebody else. You know what I mean? And then even with the fact with the father, he was just saying, oh, you look nice today. First off, inappropriate. Like, you don't tell someone that, like, at all, sir. You're literally old enough to be her grandpa. So it's just like, a lot of things. But point is, yes. So I have I can go in about this movie, and I'm sure we'll get there. So next, I'll talk about I'll talk about The Crush. I really love this movie. I think that is a great movie. Obviously, I watched this one first because it came out first, and I don't know. It's always just been a favorite of mine. I know that Adrienne is a little crazy, or not a little. She's crazy, just insane psychopath. But some of the stuff she would do made me laugh, because it's just kind of like, all right, Nick, maybe you should just like leave. Like, why didn't he just move in with Amy? Just temporary, you know what I mean, type of thing. No, he just still wanted to be there. She was sneaking in through a secret door on the floor. And then her parents was just oblivious. Like
So
he tried to bring it um to the parents and stuff. And the guy who plays Nick, Cary
Cary Elwes.
Ellis, thank you. I was gonna call him Eloise. But yeah, with him, I remember him being big in the 80s and the 90s and stuff like that. So again, it's just so great that we're introduced to this young actress, and she was just phenomenal. Like, it took me a while, because I watched it when I was a kid, so it's just kind of like, I didn't really see what a big deal it was. Like, so I didn't see the age difference. You know what I mean? But then looking at it now, like as an adult, like she was only 14, and the way that she was acting, and then again, just her parents just seemed very much disconnected from her life, and she just seemed kind of unhappy. And then with her one little friend, Cheyenne, or Cheyenne, whatever her name is, Like, I don't even know why she hung out with her. You know what I mean? It's just a lot of things. But no, I think that one is just such a great movie. And I remember watching that one as a kid, and rewatching it earlier this week it just brought me a lot of joy. Like, and oh yeah, and shout out to our friend Tyler, who I saw his tweet. It
Yeah,
made me
yeah, it was good.
laugh.
It was good.
Yeah, he's so funny. Okay, and then the last one, just with true crime. So this is one like you that I did not watch as a kid. I actually watched it for the first time. It was like 4 years ago because it was just on Tubi. This is when I first like discovered Tubi and was like all over it. I've heard of the movie, but I remember I couldn't find it. And then one day I went on there and it was just there. So I watched it ASAP. It has all the elements that I love. You know, there's a mystery, there's murder, or there's a girl who's kind of like a Nancy Drew type of thing, you know. But like you said, you described it perfectly. It's not as explicit or erotic, like the Babysitter as an example, or even like The Crush. Obviously the most erotic one, The Babysitter, then The Crush, then True Crime. Because with this one, they kind of leave like a little mystery. With the character, okay, let's just call him Kevin Dillon's character.
Because I'll forget his name every time otherwise.
Yeah, okay. Well, then you get it. So yeah, with his character, there was always just something about him that I didn't really care for, you know, but it was the 90s. So it's like he had that bad boyfriend type of vibes that you see in thriller movies. And, you know, the fact that, like you said, she was kind of a late bird with some things. So the fact that she found him like attractive and stuff, and it's like, Mary, no, because it's just kind of like, no, there's just something about him that is just awful. But yeah, I love the characters in this. I love the pacing. I love the dialogue. I love the music. I love Bill Nunn's character. He plays Detective Gunn, and he's just so great. So rest in peace. But yeah, like it's one of those movies that's, even though I watched it late, I'm pretty sure if I would have watched it as a kid, I would have loved this one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'll say with Bill Nunn's character, he also sort of played this sort of like iconic '90s trope of the sort of his bark is worse than his bite cop.
Right.
That's like, he seems like he's being harsh with Mary, but it's really because he doesn't want her to get hurt, because he
Yeah.
sees what happens to like young women every day. And I liked that. Again, for those that are fans of like 90s movies, 90s thriller, the sort of nostalgic feelings of it, you're going to get a lot. You're going to get that sort of like the cop, the cop whose bark is worse than his bite, or the like obvious killer suspect like Kevin Dillon. But is he? Oh, he is. But is he? It sort of plays with you like that. Or in like I said, each of these movies are arguably predictable, but sometimes I like that. I think like the horror landscape for the last 10 years has really become so reliant upon the twist ending, or I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
But, my favorite, I'll always love like 80s slashers. And for me, 9 out of 10 of those 80s slashers, with the exception of the ones that like focus more on a whodunit style, like not like like Halloween or Friday the 13th. You watch a Friday the 13th movie, you know who the killer is the whole time, with the exception of like part 5. Or you go to see Halloween, Michael Myers is the killer. There's no mystery. There's no like twist, like it wasn't really Michael Myers, but so movies like this, there's an argument to be made for them being predictable. You know what you're going to get, and it's satisfying. And I think that each one of these has that. But as far as true crime goes, I guess maybe now we'll divide them out a little. But I'll say in true crime, Alicia Silverstone, each of these movies, she's so versatile. I know I said that earlier, but like I think it really goes to show, because each one of these characters, in their own way, is the antithesis of Cher Horowitz in Clueless.
Right.
As Cher, she's sort of ditzy. She's not ditzy, but she's sort of ditzy. She has that sort of effervescent, out there quality that sometimes, she wants to be a matchmaker, and sometimes her arrow hits the target. Right. But typically, she's living in a world that's not so grounded in reality. But each of the characters in these movies, and we'll start with true crime, she is living in a reality, in a very bleak reality in some of them. Like, true crime, she's this young woman who wants to follow in her father's footsteps, which, like I said earlier, sorry, it was my conversation before was mostly just blurting all my thoughts all out to everyone. But, like I said, the trailer shows that there may have been a little bit more to her father. But anyway, he was this cop, apparently a fallen cop, and she wants to like go in with that. But she has her like younger sister and brother, her single mom, who I think is a nurse. And yeah, the mom character was a little bit like I said, I really can't stand people in general, but parents in movies where she thinks her daughter, played by again another 90s
I
iconic,
agree.
she
Yeah.
was the bad girl and everything, Marla Solikoff or
Hmm.
Sokoloff or something like that. She was on Full House, everything. You saw her everywhere. She
Yeah.
was the bad girl.
Every.
And so the mother comes in and is yelling at her about using birth control pills. And Mary comes in, Alicia Silverstone's character is like, those are my friends. It's not
Yeah.
hers, but it really was Marla's characters.
Mhm.
But the mother doesn't even like say like, oh, so, I'm sorry I misjudged you. Sorry about that.
Right.
She just kind of gives a look like and walks out the door. But again, the trailer implies that maybe there's a little bit more to why she is the way she is. So I'm willing to like forgive her a little bit. But anyway, Mary's going through with her life. She finds out her fellow student has been murdered brutally. And, she's fantasized. Ironically, she's the one fantasizing in this movie. And she's fantasizing the sort of like thrill of the mystery and the sort of like not exotic in like its main way of use, but like the sort of exoticness of maybe being an investigator, like a mystery detective, Nancy Drew. And then all of a sudden she finds out, whoa, that's not the world. She's way in over her head. She might be the next target. This guy that she's sort of crushing on, her first real crush ever, might be the killer. So it's an interesting sort of look at how she kind of has to grow up over the course of this movie. And I'll say with Kevin Dillon's character, he's predictably the killer, but the way everybody in the movie plays a role, it seems like it would just be a by the numbers murder mystery, but everybody plays a role. From Bill Nunn, he serves a purpose, his character. Uh, Earl Perkins, his character is this sort of red herring, but it still sort of serves a purpose. Everything is actually really well crafted in this movie. Again, it's not Citizen Kane. It's not trying to be anything more than it is, but I think it all comes together for, it's like what I felt probably when I was 13 or so reading an R.L. Stine novel or a Lois Duncan novel, I'm being titillated. I think that's the word I was looking for earlier when I said exotic. You're being titillated. Like the whole ending and how it ends up, and it's this final showdown above this glass thing, because the whole setting of the film has always led back to this sort of
Yeah.
factory place. And I just think it all comes together in the end.
Mhm.
And it for watching as an adult, I think it works. I think like it's barely held together, but it does hold itself together, and I think does a really great job about it. But
And
what do you think about like the performances in True Crime, and particularly, Alicia Silverstone in it?
I love the fact that she is diverse. In some ways, yes, those characters, they do have some things in common, some things. But then for the most part, I feel like Mary, she is probably mentally the strongest, in my opinion. But it just seems like for some reason she doesn't think that. She seemed very much insecure, especially in the beginning. And then even
Yeah.
when it came to Kevin Dillon's character, it's just kind of like, because she's never, yes, she's young, but she also never experienced that before. She was naive about it. Where, with her training, wanting to be a cop, it's just kind of like, wow, your spidey senses kind of went off when it came to him for some reason,
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I doubt that will happen to her again. Just being real with you, I don't like
Yeah.
if
Oh,
we
I
ever saw
agree.
like a sequel. Yeah. So, but at the same time, I love her performance because there's a difference, you kind of see like the growth, in her, like from the start. And then even before, she always had the strength, just the fact that what you mentioning with her sister and, her taking the blame or saying it's her friend. And like you said, that scene really rubbed me the wrong way because when I first watched the movie, again, as an adult, it was just kind of like, God, that was a little bit weird. Like, why would she didn't even want to apologize like the mother? And then on top of that, and I get what you're saying, like, yeah, she probably did have like this whole backstory. She's probably working, trying to make ends meet. She has to take care of these three kids, but they're not little kids. You know what I mean? You don't have to clean up after them. You can communicate with them. And it just seems like she's just so much in a negative space that it seems that with Mary, her escape, her way of dealing with it and wanting to, I guess, provide in a way is by following her father's footsteps.
Right.
By this is her only path, because clearly her brother didn't care. He was always on his computer. The sister didn't care, so she was the only one that held on to it. So again, I really liked her performance, and I also love Kellen Dillon's performance, because I never really, not that I don't pay attention to him too much, but this was like probably like the first notable movie for me. I know he's been in a lot of things, just notable, that I really enjoyed, because it's just kind of like you said, it is a little bit predictable, because I felt that when I saw him, he was giving me those like bad boyfriend type of vibes.
Right.
And it seemed like he would want to try to manipulate Mary in a way, which he did, and kind of used her in certain ways. So that's kind of like, you kind of saw it coming, but at the same time, we had to go through that path in order for her to be, not trying to sound cheesy, but for her to become the person who she's meant to become. So I really love the performances, like, and just in that way, I love like her friend dynamic, when she's just, she's talking about the classmate that was brutally murdered, and she's just already doing her detective type of work, and her friend had to tell her, like, hey, this isn't, in a magazine, in a book, this is real life. This is someone's sister, little sister and stuff. Just kind of like remind her and snap her back into reality. So, because it seemed like that was like her whole world. And I don't know if you ever had that before, like you're like really, really into something. And I mean, not that extreme like her, but you're
Right.
really into something. And sometimes you too have to get snapped back into reality to realize that, okay, yeah, this is real life.
Oh, I did theater and acting. I went out there all the time into that zone, like
Wow.
pull me back. I'm not living in an episode of Dawson's Creek. This is real life. Yeah, no, many times. I will say that I think it's interesting, though, of the three movies, despite the maybe semi-sleazy quality of the babysitter or the sort of projected out there sexuality she has in the crush, in the babysitter, that really is the only one of the three movies that she actually goes all the way with somebody, and it's in such a like not sexy scene, and I kind of appreciate that because it's not trying to make it glamorous. Say a young woman is watching this, or a young boy, and they're not going to think like, some movies or scenes might like have some romantic music or playing. It's very quick in the back seat of a car
Yeah.
and uncomfortable. And I don't remember when I watched it on IMDb. I don't remember that, but I bought it on DVD to just have for this, just in case it disappeared from streaming services.
Mm-hmm.
And when that scene happened, I was like, oh, I don't remember that. And I'm like, I felt so uncomfortable. And I
Right?
just interesting that of the three movies, where you have one movie that's all about that, but it never happens. And another movie where that's what she wants to happen so bad, and it never happens. This is the one movie that actually does do that, and it's in such like, I wouldn't say it's in a brutal way, but it's in a very bleak way. It's in a
Yeah.
very like not romantic way. Like it sort of speaks to it's another almost clue about Kevin Dillon's character, because he's sort of leading her into this moment like, I don't want to hurt you, I don't want to hurt you. But then when you kind of watch how it plays out, you're sort of like, oh, he's being like not at all gentle with her, not at all, like trying to make this nice for her. It's he's clearly like using her. Like, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
it left a bad taste in my mouth. And but yet I appreciate it because it's not romanticizing. Like somebody young watching this movie, like, oh, I should go do that. I should go meet some older stranger and do that. I like that it was basically like, see, this is what it really looks like, which I feel like is the whole
Yeah.
point of the movie. Like what you were saying, having a passion or a obsession, but then like needing to be pulled back into reality. I feel like that scene sort of culminates that whole idea, because she is sort of thinking it's going to be this sort of thing, and then the kind of the rest of the movie, she's destroyed from it. She's going to come back together. It's not like her whole life was going to be based on this moment, but it's the first moment in the film, I think, that leads from the second half of the film. She's now living in reality that things are not what she thought they were going to be. I was going to go on to the Babysitter next, but was there anything else you wanted to say about true crime before I do?
Just, if you like thrillers, true crime, I know that's the title, but if you like thrillers and Nancy Drew kind of schoolgirl, Catholic schoolgirl, you mentioned that earlier, I recommend checking it out ASAP.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it 1,000 times at the video store when I was a teenager. I'm sure I was always tempted to, I loved Alicia Silverstone, so I'm sure I was tempted, and I don't know why I never grabbed it. But then, let's move on to, let's discuss then the Babysitter a little bit more. Primarily, again, same, I want to kind of start with Alicia Silverstone's character and then, branch out. But now, I would say you said in true crime that she's a little bit more grounded in reality, or her sense, her mind, she's the brightest that way. I actually think, again, in The Crush, she's super intelligent, but clearly wackadoo. I feel like the Babysitter is actually the role where she's the most rational, she's the most pragmatic. I feel like, again, it's almost hard to pick apart the movie because there's so much fantasy that's involved. But if you follow the thread of what really happened throughout the night, she was the one who was when her boyfriend is calling her on the phone and wanting to come in, and she's sort of I don't think it's a good idea. She's not provoking him I can't believe you came over here, blah, blah, blah. She's very much I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
When Nicky Katt's character, the sort of dangerous guy, when he's hitting her at the beginning of the movie, she's sort of I've told you no before. I'm sticking to it. Please leave me alone.
Yeah.
With the dad, she knows she's babysitting. She's going to get paid from them. So she's trying to be respectful in this uncomfortable situation. Whatever you say, Mr. Whatever his name is, she kept saying whatever you say, which then of course echoed throughout his fantasies for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Right. But again, of her three roles, and I think that there's similarities, but I think that they're very different. I feel like she is the girl next door in this, but not necessarily in a stereotypical way. What I think of as the real girl next door, girls that I've known in my life at that age, at that time, she's not trying to be a supermodel, especially in Clueless and stuff. You do think first of the blonde hair and the blue eyes and the outfits and all this, but in this movie I feel like she literally seems like you could know this girl Jennifer, and really you only learn her name at the end of the movie, which again I think is another interesting point about it, because they make her nameless, but as the movie progresses you realize, wait, she was actually the only one that was smart, knew who she was, had confidence, stood her ground, knew when to get the hell out of there, fought for her life, because as everything culminates into this thing. And I will say, again, there's a lot of sleazy moments, but I do like the Babysitter, how everything is sort of leading to this ending, that all these stories come crashing literally together. And it is sort of left with the question that she asks, Alicia Silverstone asks Jeremy London, which is, what were you thinking?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is the whole movie, And then just real quick, I want to say about Dolly. I love Dolly. I love Lee Garrington as Dolly. Her parts of the movie what will the neighbors think? She just cracks me up the entire movie, because I think that she is, she just gave birth to a baby, and I can only imagine how she's feeling, and she knows that she's reaching an age, and she's hearing these men off in the corner that are being so dismissive of women and being so jerky, and she knows that she's who they're talking about, but they're not talking about her, but essentially they are. And this one guy happens to pay this off flippant compliment that her whole night now is changed and electrified, while she's dealing with her creepy, gross, demented husband, who is JT Walsh. I'll say, I think he was also in the movie The Client. I don't know him in a lot of other stuff, but you believed he was this creepy older guy. But again, I do think that the movie overall does raise some interesting questions. I don't think it needs to be as explicit
Hmm.
as it gets. At the same time, I don't know that it would have the same effect if it wasn't. I think it's designed to make you feel uncomfortable,
Right.
hey, you teenage boy watching this, think about what you're thinking about,
Hmm.
because ultimately it's not like a learn a lesson movie, but there's a lesson to be learned, I
Yeah.
think, in each of the scenarios. But again, I am curious to hear a little bit more. I mean, I can gather what you kind of thought of it overall, but I am curious to hear a little bit more of your insight on Alicia Silverstone, but then the rest.
Well, first you did describe the dad perfectly, so I don't even have to. Or the
Yeah,
husband, he's demented and psycho and gross. But we are absolutely right with her character, Alicia Silverstone's character in this one. She is very much rational. She just seemed like she's just a regular girl. She's not provocative. She's just living her life,
yeah, just trying to
So,
do
and
her
then
homework.
trying to do her homework. And clearly she has a guy that she's dating and she already explained to him. And that's what I find just so annoying. It's just that she was very much vocal with a lot of people. Yeah, like you said, with the dad, she was just being kind of dismissive because it's awkward. He's old. And then on top of that, and it's just like, okay, you're my employer. You know what I mean? And she probably didn't see it that much as a big deal because the mother was always around. You know what I mean? His
Yeah,
wife. So I can totally get that. But then it's just kind of like when it comes to, how she was just very straightforward with Jeremy London's character and with Nikki Katz's character, the creepy guy. And it's just kind of like she was straightforward with you. At this point, I mean, it's not surprising because some guys, they just don't listen. You know what I mean? So it's just like whatever. But it was like she didn't ask for it. Because I hate when people try to say, like with women, like, oh, well, she asked for it or she's living. You're asking when you're breathing. You know what I mean? So it's
yeah.
just, and that's the thing that makes me so, it gets me so, like, I don't know what the word is, but it kind of, it doesn't make me angry, but it just makes me feel uncomfortable and gross because it's just kind of like, once again, I don't understand why she can't just do her job and you guys can just leave her alone. Like
Yeah,
there's a whole world out there. Why don't you go see a movie or something? That's what comes to mind. But just back to her character, I love the fact that I've never compared to the Crush. She was psychotic. True crime. She was very much focused.
right.
But with this one, she's a regular girl, like very much relatable. Like you said, we probably know a girl like that or met a girl like that. Just normal girl trying to do her homework.
Yeah,
And I just get so bothered by everyone having a fantasy. And I understand like sometimes that's not even sometimes, that's a part of life. People have that. But then when she did ask that question to Jeremy London's character, her boyfriend or whatever he was at that point, I would have dumped him. But when she did ask that question, it is, like, what were you thinking? Like, seriously, what were you thinking? Like, at this point, when she told you when you called not to come by, and the fact that you're still trying to push her to do something, it's just exhausting at this point. You're pushing her away. And then
yeah,
I guess maybe he felt his little male ego or whatever was bruised because with the other guy talking stuff in his ear, so he felt the need, like, okay, I have to do something. It's just like, you have a nice girl, you know what I mean? Like, just leave her alone. Let her babysit. So,
yeah.
and then even going with the mom, like I like you said, I can only imagine as well how she feels. She's an older woman, and on top of that, she just had a baby. So I'm pretty sure that she didn't really feel too comfortable in her own
Right.
skin. Then on top of that, I'm pretty sure her husband, he probably wasn't always that way. You know what I mean? Otherwise, why would you marry him? But he just seemed like he just got sleazier and sleazier. But like you said, she knows what they're talking about. She knows how it is. But finally, someone gives her a compliment, from a man, and it's just kind of like she's never had, her own husband doesn't do that. So she kind of, in her case, I totally got that. And I don't feel like I'm not trying to be sexist, you know what I mean, when it comes to her feelings, because I feel like hers is more of an emotional type of thing. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's
yeah. The boys are
emotional.
all lust,
Right,
lust.
right.
Yeah,
Hers, it may turn into that, but I think initially that's exactly what it was. So, and then even when it comes with the little boy, like you said, his was a little bit more innocent, but even with that, it's just like, you're like, how, 10, 12? I don't know, but it's just like, come on, dude, stop. So it's just everyone just has these thoughts about this girl who's just trying to live her life. I'm surprised too with a couple of things that she did though. Jennifer with her character, like washing her clothes there. I just, girl, no one, who cares if you have ice cream on your shirt or whatever it is? Why can't you just use like a towel and like, you know what I mean? And then these kids are going to sleep. You can just have an ice cream print shirt. Like, no one cares. See, I'm going down a rabbit hole. But then even with her taking like a bath, it's just kind of like, okay, you're sitting in someone's bathtub. So it's just, you know what I mean?
No, I could never imagine doing that when babysitting or something.
Right,
I couldn't.
no,
But apparently the mother said at the beginning she's done it before,
yeah.
or she suspected that before, and it's sort of like, well, why were you taking a bath the last time? Like, what, you that messy? I don't know.
Were you that messy? Why don't you just take a shower? Like,
right.
A quick shower, lock the door. When it comes to this movie, like I said, I know of a lot of people who actually really, really enjoy this movie because they like it in a psychological kind of way, which I can understand. But for me personally, it just kind of, it's not for me because I find myself getting more irritated with some decisions and somewhere it's just like, I just can't get over the fact that where it's just like she's literally just trying to like live her life and you guys are like stalking her whole existence. Like, you're being creepy. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's fair. I think the way you feel about it is very fair. I'm on the camp that I do enjoy the movie, but again, I don't know. I mean, I've been watching it since I was 13 or so, but I think like it's the stuff that you don't like about it, though, is in my opinion the stuff that the director wanted you to feel. You know, and I think it's, that's going to be the reaction some people are going to have. Like, you want me to feel creeped out? Well, I feel creeped out. I don't like your movie now. Whereas for me, I don't know. I look at it again from her point of view, and again, the other two people that don't have any sort of fantasies are the other couple at the giving the party, Nikki Katz's parents. And I think again, it's because they're kind of satisfied with who they are. The only time it sort of comes out, the dad, George Segal's character, mentions, because the two boys used to be friends, the teenage boys, and they had a falling out because of the one's bad behavior. The other one wanted to be this football star, the all-American boy. And clearly the dad is like the one kid's dad is so proud of his son's friend and not his son. And so that's the only time he kind of mentions a fantasy. But then you realize, wow, he's lost his son now in the end. Because I think it could have been, now I will say, I think this movie, and I'm sure there was a discussion, it looks like it's close, that it could have been one of those movies where the whole time they're having these fantasies about this girl, and then she ends up getting killed. Because for a second there with the car, now then I don't think I would have cared for this movie. I like that she gets to kind of come out in the end and be like, what are you all thinking? Like, get yourselves together. But instead, it could have very easily been like, wow, they've all had these fantasies about this girl, which all of them at some point or another turned to murder. And, what if they almost did murder her? It was very close. One forcibly, the dad by accident, the boyfriend by bringing in this dangerous character. And I think why I enjoy this movie so much is because ultimately of the transition of her character to become, even when like the boyfriend smacks her because he believes that she's slept with the other guy, and he like finally just erupts and smacks her, and she's like, he fooled you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a fool. And for me, that's the sort of stuff that makes me like love the movie. The little boy, he was starting, like, I think it's supposed to be, he has this like innocent fantasy, but he's going to learn to be happier without the fantasy, because he sees what happens and he has presence of mind to go call 911. But those last few tense moments of them sitting on the couch, the final fight between the boys, when it's sort of, I get chills the moment when he's looking at her and she's like, I know what's about to happen, and she runs, defends herself, gets out of the house. I'm cheering for her the whole time, but I 100% get why this might leave a bad taste in your mouth, why it might like, because that is his intention. It's like for me, why some people, when you watch a Dario Argento movie, You know, he wants to make you have certain feelings. You're
Right,
either
right.
going to enjoy that sort of manipulation or you're not. And then moving on to The Crush, Alicia Silverstone, this was her first movie, 1993. Yeah, did she turn 14 on set or 15 on set? I know it was right around there.
I thought it was 15 because it
Yeah,
was
I think
she
she
was
was
16.
14, turning to
Yeah.
15. I think you're right. And she plays this terrific, so not Alicia Silverstone character of like I mean, she's super smart in the way that all of her characters are pretty smart. Even Cher, she's ditzy, but Cher's even smart. You know, Cher's smart, and because I don't think ditzy and smart are, I don't think they're exclusive to each other. I think you can be
Hmm.
ditzy and smart, and
Absolutely.
and I think that in this movie, though, she's like scary, brilliant, and she becomes fixated on this guy. And it's almost like her genius status is like detrimental to her because she's able to manipulate these
Hmm.
situations. And Cary Elwes is great in it. Like you said, two 90s icons. He had just finished, Princess Bride, all those. He was, people knew him. And I mean, obviously, he's gone on to have quite a few movies in the horror film. He was in the remake of Black Christmas. He was in Saw. So he's had his career too. But their sort of dynamic is great. But again, it's a smaller cast, but they all have an effect. They all have a purpose. My favorite dynamic are the moments when Alicia Silverstone is with Jennifer Rubin's character, Nick's girlfriend, and the sort of like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, go play little girl attitude that Jennifer Rubin, of course, has to
Yeah.
this 14-year-old girl. And, but you see I think it's just, again, what shows how great of an actress Alicia Silverstone really was and is. You
Hmm.
see in her eyes that she's sort of like, oh, I'm going to teach you a lesson for saying that to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to get you. Oh, you have a problem with bees? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And love that it sort of, again, culminates into this like junior adult novel or young adult novel ending that like takes place on this carousel. It's so ridiculous, but it still all works. I love the final like punch at the end where she goes flying across the room.
Me
Like
too.
it's so over the top, but that's sort of what you go to see at the
Yeah.
time. You went to see a movie like this for that sort of absurdity, for the like, as long as you could believe the characters, and I believe each and every one of them, you can then believe when they get into these crazy circumstances, like climbing down and finding there's a secret altar to you, devoted shrine to you, or you're trapped you're a photographer, and you're trapped in a lab, a dark room with bees coming in, or just all the moments. I think that it's like, I don't think it's a campy movie,
Hmm.
but it has it's fun. I would say
Yeah.
it's a fun thriller movie. And again, just Alicia Silverstone's introductory performance is terrific, and I think makes the movie definitely worth a watch. And it's fun. But what are your thoughts on The Crush? And
I agree with you. I was actually going to talk about that ending when she goes flying.
it's
Oh my
so
god,
funny,
yeah, that always made me laugh because they do it in like slow mo, then it just speeds her, she just flies, and then
right?
that's it. That's the end. And that's the perfect word to say. You said it's over the top. It's not cheesy, it's over the top. So
Correct.
there's a
Yes.
difference. But yeah,
Agreed.
I love her performance in this one. This was actually, I think, probably the first thing that I saw her in. I
Mm.
was doing some like research just to see what she was on and stuff like that, or what she was in. And one of her first roles on a show, she was in the Wonder Years, and I didn't even know that,
Oh,
you
right.
know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. But this was like her first feature, like her first movie and everything, and that's so awesome because it's just like she literally just obviously she's the movie. You know what I mean? And so you're absolutely right when it comes to her character, Adrian. She's so smart that she's able to, make people believe a certain thing, certain ways about her. So that's why even when it comes to her parents,
Yeah.
they thought that they had a normal kid, and she did seem normal. Like obviously, I know it's like normal, but you know what I mean. Like you see her room, she's a normal teenage girl. Like she's into horseback riding, she's doing great in school. She has a friend who she hangs out with. Even when she was explaining to Nick how she doesn't have a lot of friends, so people make fun of her, he probably just assumed that she was mature. That's what I thought, because even with her, and obviously he did say, "Are you sure you're 14?" Which is like,
Right.
don't say that, there's like a lot of things, but I don't think, even though it has that kind of, I don't want to say sleaze, but you know what I mean? That kind of sleaze eroticness, kind of like The Babysitter, but it's more of a hint. It's more of like a little dusty, you know what I mean? Like, you're not getting everything. So, so that's how I felt with Cary's character. But
Right.
anyway, going back to her, I just find her so interesting, because this means that she's been living her whole life a lie, and she knows that she can't show who she really is. And then obviously, even at the end, and this is all spoilers, we already spoiled things.
Right.
Even at the end, after she gets like kicked across the room or whatever, she's in this facility, she's in this hospital so she can get better. Obviously, her parents, they have a lot of money, so they probably want to keep things hush hush and just send her away. Oh, she went to boarding school. I just assume that that's what they're saying. You know what I mean? Because who's going to really believe that? And they probably had to pay off the cops or something. I don't know. But anyway, I say that just because you can tell that she did not learn her lesson. Clearly, because she's ready to move on to the doctor.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I just find her character really interesting. I find the movie funny, like the way she does interact with Amy,
Amy.
saying some stuff. And it's just kind of like, I don't know what I would say if a 14-year-old was saying that kind of stuff to me. I mean, I would probably be a little bit annoyed and, go play or something. But at the same time, I would think to myself, okay, where did she get this from though? Like, no offense, Nick, did you make her believe that he had to have made her believe that she has a chance with him? Not saying that she's not crazy and psycho and all those things, because she is, but I think he just kind of made her feel clearly that she had a chance. And even what I'm saying, like with him wanting to get a place to leave, you could have stayed with Amy temporarily, right, or even stay at a hotel. You get what I'm saying? It's not like all those things were his really anyway. So, and especially because he had a job now. So it's like, you know what I mean? Just until you find something, do it when she's at school. So, and then just disappear in the wind. But no, see, that's me going down a rabbit hole. Point is, I remember just watching this movie so many times as a kid, and I just really enjoyed it, because it's like, it's a thriller, but it does kind of have like that real life horror elements, like the thing with the bees. She did, like you said, kept note of that with Amy not liking bees. And then with her own friend Cheyenne, oh, I'll take care of it for you. Then she leaves and comes over. Oh, are you okay? Like, I'm not okay. You did this, so.
Right. It's
so there's just so much. There's so much. And then, like, obviously, who would believe that a grown man, that he didn't sleep with this girl if she's saying it? And they did find, liquid in her. So, you know what I mean? And then, with the father was always oblivious. Adrian's dad, her mom was always oblivious. And I'm not saying it's not their fault, but at the same time, you clearly did not know your child.
Oh, yeah.
And it shows, because they barely would spend time with her. Maybe that's what happened,
Well, I think that's just how manipulative she was, though. She pulled the wool over their eyes. And, even in the scene where they're sort of like, he's like, oh, she did this to my car. They literally turn and ask her. And she's like, no, of course not. And, it's sort of like they're like, well, we asked, what do you want us to do? Because nobody, I think, wants to admit their child is a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
And I love, though, the relationship with Cheyenne, because I love how manipulative she is. That she has the frame of mind to even think to grab the condom and grab it and use it to create this diabolical plan to set him up, like going to meet him at his where his his work party is going on, and to create that scene, and you sit there as the viewer just like horrified.
I was horrified.
And just to see how she does it, but that she's running the show. And I think that's the scariest part of it, especially when you're an adult watching it, to see how like a young person could really quickly get control. Like, it's sort of like, you think as the adult you're the one with the power, the control, but not always. Not always. And I love that Cheyenne is the one character she knew, because Cheyenne was the one character that Alicia Silverstone's character, Adrian, could be truthful with, could be
Yeah.
honest with, because she knew this is a kid. Nobody's going to listen to what she has to say anyway. So, yeah, she could go right off in front of her and just say these lies about Nick. Like, I don't really care if you believe me or not, but you're here as the audience. Like, that serves your purpose. And it shows how lonely Cheyenne must have been to
Yeah.
put up with it, you know. But I will say, I just want to say, I think, it does have a classic 90s thriller end, the sort of in the hospital, like she's getting rehabilitated, but then you see, oh no, she sent like 1,000 letters to him, and now she's but luckily for Nick, it looks like she is going to be moving on because
Yeah.
she has her sights set on this doctor. Yes, I do think that, you know, he shouldn't have gone to that lighthouse with her, Nick. I think he has some responsibility in this. And in like true crime, the trailer for this shows a deleted scene with them in a swimming pool together. I'm guessing in her swimming pool. And you have to wonder like what happened to that moment, because you have to think if they wanted you to feel for Nick, you really could not think that he had any sort of like participation in making her think that
Right.
something was possible. Not saying that he did anything, but led her to believe this because she still is young. It's sort of like young genius, but she still has the emotions of a 14-year-old, which is like, well, I believed you said this, so why don't you want me? You know, and like it's a little bit more over the top because you're a teenager. And you might have the mind to think this way, but physically you're not ready for it. But interestingly enough, and I find this to be true, you know, in the past when I've had friends or something that has a crush on somebody and you think you're never going to get over it, oh, the crush. I just didn't realize that's the name of the movie. But anyway, when you have a crush on somebody, you're like, you think that's it. That's the only person ever. And it goes to show there's always
Yeah.
somebody next. And she was too young to realize that, but clearly was living that as she's now got her eyes set on this doctor. And I
Yeah.
just love that sort of like, it's not a creepy ending, but it's a good, juicy ending. Like, oh, Adrian's still out there, still getting crushes. You know, I just think it's a fun. I think all of them have enjoyable moments and are fun 90s movies, and I just think it's really cool. Was there anything else about The Crush you wanted to say, or any of the movies?
Um, just one more thing with the crush, because you touched on it. That scene when she walked into his work function
Mm,
because he didn't show up at her little show or whatever.
right.
Oh my God, I was horrified. Like
Horrified.
I could not imagine. But then especially when he was even like, I guess at that point with Nick's character, he was just so fed up, you know.
Yeah.
So he kind of walked around a corner with her, and the way she was screaming bloody murder. You know what I mean? Like, how can you explain that? You can't explain that. You
Nope.
know, so it's unfortunate, but yeah, that's a really standout scene, and just the fact that her performance, how she was acting, like she was screaming, you know, and then trying to kiss him, and you know what I mean, just having like a meltdown, and that's who she is. That's her true self, you know.
I hate to say Alicia Silverstone, to be able to play a role like that or any of these roles had to have a certain level of maturity, had to
Right,
have a certain level of Adrian in her, not the psychopathic part, but the high
right.
intelligence to tap into the like, you believe this girl. And it is sort of like, no, at that party, no matter what, no matter how innocent he is, he had to have done something to have this girl here screaming at him. So it looks bad no matter what. So, Zena, of the three movies, how would you rank them, or which one would you recommend in order of worst to best?
Okay. I really love The Crush, so The Crush is going to be first because I
Yes.
feel like there's something for everyone, and like you just explained it like that word, it's over the top. So
Right.
that I feel like it just bleeds 90s thriller. So you need that movie in your life. Then I'll recommend True Crimes just because that's also, I don't think that one's going to be for everyone, but
Mm.
if you do like thrillers that are kind of like, you know, Nancy Drew type of stuff with a schoolgirl kind of playing detective, you may enjoy this one as well. And then I recommend The Babysitter, not because I hate it, because I don't hate it. I'm just not a big fan, but I do feel like it will have you feeling all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
So if you're perfectly fine with that, you can check it out. But
Well, I
in
would
all
say
of them,
for
she's a
me,
great performer.
Absolutely. I think that's, a solid thing. She is a great performer in all of them. I would say that I agree. The Crush, I think, is the best of the three. I think it's the most enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's going to be the most what you expect going into a 90s
Hmm.
thriller type movie. I would then say The Babysitter is next, but for the reasons of, I think it'll make people think. But I also think that there's a risk involved in it because I do think that a lot of people will have the same reaction that you have based on the director clearly set out to make a certain kind of movie, whether nefarious or not. And I think people either are going to kind of love it or hate it. So I'll put it in the second spot because it can be kind of polarizing. And then true crime. I actually think crime, while The Crush is my favorite of the three, I think True Crime has a broader appeal. I think it's a more classic thriller, even borderlining slasher type of movie.
Oh yeah.
It's not a slasher, but it has a
Mhm.
certain style that is like that. But honestly, I think all three are fun, and I think that all three are great choices because of Alicia Silverstone's performance in each one of them, a 90s icon in these early 90s thrillers. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Which of those 90s thriller Alicia Silverstone movies are your favorite? True Crime, The Babysitter, or The Crush? Or do you have another favorite Alicia Silverstone movie? Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Zena, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, over on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker, or over at Wicked Horror, or I'm Justin Steele. You can also find me over at Wicked Horror, 401 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, you Real Queen of Horror, for joining me tonight. I had such a good time talking about Alicia Silverstone.
Thank you so much. I had an awesome time as well, and it was just great just rewatching these movies.
I can't agree more. It was great to watch, like having a reason to watch them all again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good one.